Hello and welcome to the demonstration video for Microsoft Excel 2016 Module 5. Before we begin, make sure that you have the appropriate file downloaded from Canvas and opened on your screen. And also ensure that you are in the Payment Function Problem tab, which you will find here across the bottom. All right, so let's begin our lesson for today. The very first thing we're going to talk about as a continuation of what we discussed last week relates to formulas and functions. Again, these are built-in Excel entities that basically help you come up with answers for common situations that you see in life, plus, such as averages of things and all that good stuff. But today our focus turns to making payments, okay? And payment function, which is what we're going to study here, can be applied to a whole host of scenarios, whether that be taking out a loan for a car, for a condo, maybe a boat, if you are one of the rich people. But anyway, let's choose the one that's probably the most practical for folks. And this one we're going to choose is buying a car, okay? So let's picture a scenario here. You walk into a car dealership and you want to buy a used vehicle, okay? You look at the window of the car and it says $18,930. They also have a policy that says that you can't negotiate the price, okay? Which we all know is not realistic, but let's just go with that premise. So you are at the point that you are going to pay $18,930 for this car. Furthermore, you decide that you have $3,000 tucked away in your savings account that you want to use as a down payment. For those of you not familiar with the concept of down payment, most of the time when you need to take out a loan for something, the bank or the financial institution you're getting the loan from typically requires you to put some sort of money down up front. This is really their way of knowing that you're more or less serious about making this loan, okay? So you decide you're going to buy this $18,930 car and you're going to put $3,000 down, okay? Now, the lending institution, so let's say you're getting this loan from a bank, they have told you that they're going to allow you to pay the loan back in 6 years. So you have 6 years, or in other words, 12 payments a year times 6, and you have it at 7% interest. And that interest, as you see here, is expressed as what is called an APR, so an annual percentage rate, okay? Because as you know, you don't borrow money for free. You have to basically pay back the institution that you're getting it from, not only for the money you borrow, but then also you have to give them a certain percentage interest, a little kickback, so they can make money on the money. So you have all of the inputs necessary to be able to figure out how much you're going to have to pay for this car every month for 6 years in order to pay it totally back, okay? So there's a couple things we're going to do here. You have two options, the hard way and the easy way. And you know me, I always want to take you down the easy route. So you could take this $18,930 and drop it right here in cell B2. Just type it straight in. Or what you could do is make B2 the active cell, and then come up to your formula bar, hit the equal sign, and then click B14 and hit enter. So what I just did was I wrote a reference that took anything in B14 and dropped it up here, okay? Why this is helpful, and you'll see this play out as we go through, is that if you, for instance, get in the ability where you can start negotiating price, all you're going to have to do as we start to plow through some of these cells is change it down here, and then it'll subsequently change everything through here, okay? So in our class, and for everything we do with payment function, you need to make sure that rows 2 and 3 especially, and then other ones you'll see here, use this equal sign and then the cell down here to reference it back up. You have to do that. Do not type it straight in, okay? Now, same concept for our down payment. We are going to do equal sign, and then we're going to bring B15, which is our down payment, up from the bottom. So $3,000 in our down payment column. Now what we need to do in B4 is figure out the amount to finance. And basically what that means is take the cost of the car, subtract out how much money you're putting down in a down payment, and then you'll figure out the bottom line about how much money you're going to have to take the loan for, okay? That's a simple subtraction problem in B4, which is just equal sign B2 minus B3. So we go to the bank saying, all said and done, we need $15,930 for the loan. Okay, so that's what we have to finance. Now let's move down. Our APR, our annual percentage rate, as you know, is 7%. However, I want to draw your attention to row 9. In row 9, you will see we are calculating a monthly payment, but you're getting your interest expressed in rates that are annual. What is important here is you have to make sure that your rates match. In other words, you have to express your annual percentage rate as a month if you're doing it as a monthly payment, okay? If this was an annual payment, meaning a one-time payment a year, then you could simply bring your 7% up, okay? But what we need to do here is express this as a monthly payment. So it's really the easiest way. I'm sorry to any business majors. I know there's more technical ways of explaining it, but for those of us that don't do this on a regular basis, that's just the easiest way to explain it. So in B6, we are going to do equal sign. We're going to take our rate expressed as an APR, and we are going to divide it by 12, okay? Because 12 months in a year. And that brings us to 0.58%, okay? In B7, we need to express the term of our loan, okay? So to do that, we are going to say equal sign B17, because it's 6 years, and we are going to multiply that by 12, because it's 6 years at 12 monthly payments. So in total, you are going to be making 72 payments over the course of the year, okay? Whatever this number winds up being in monthly payments, you're going to pay it 72 times to pay your loan back, principal, meaning what you borrowed, plus the interest. So now let's calculate our monthly payment, because we have absolutely everything we need to be able to do this. In here, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to our Formulas tab. Then we're going to come to our Financials. And we're going to scroll down in our list, and we're going to find PMT, okay, right here, PMT. When you click on it, the dialog box for function arguments will come up. You'll notice that there are 5 inputs here, 3 of which are bold, okay? If you remember from last week, bold inputs are required. These 2 are not, because they are not bold. You'll also remember from last week, you can either, with the cursor blinking, pick the right cell by clicking, or you can use your selector, choose the cell, click the selector again, and it'll drop in the reference, whatever is easier. So for the rate, what we're going to do is we're going to get our cursor blinking in the function arguments, and we're going to select B6, because that is the rate, the interest rate per period of the loan. Now, if you ever get lost, look here, because it says, for example, use 6% divided by 4 for quarterly payments on a 6% APR, okay? So that means you're paying 4 times a year, but we're paying monthly, so it would be the same concept, 6 divided by 12 for monthly payments, okay? So it's even helping you here. Our NPER, as I call it, or the number of total payments in the loan, refers to cell B7, because it's 72 times you're paying it. PV, which stands for the present value, is probably the only one that may throw some people off, okay? It is the total amount that a series of future payments is worth now, okay? That's the financial definition. But the layman's term of it is how much are you needing to take out in a loan, okay? And the trick to this is it is negative B4. Because it is, to make this whole thing work, it is the negative amount of whatever it is to finance, okay? The way I tell people to remember it is, you owe $15,930. So think you are negative $15,930 at this point, okay? So with those 3 inputted, you'll notice that the answer formulated right there. So when you click OK, the total monthly payment on this loan is $271.59. In other words, that is the online bill pay payment that you are going to have to make every month for 6 years to pay off this car for the $15,930 that you needed to get it, plus the charge of interest that the bank is giving to you. Speaking of that, let's come down here to B11. Even though this is sort of, not totally related to the payment function, I still think it's fun for you to see how this works out, okay? So the total you will pay. I want you to do equal sign B9, which is the total monthly payment of $271.59, and I want you to multiply that by the term of the loan, which is 72 months. In other words, your monthly payment for the number of times you have to do it. In looking at that, you will notice that you, over the 72 periods, will pay $19,554.53. Now, most ask, why is this number different from that? Well, it's because of this 7% interest. And I'll just kind of show you on the side. If I take the amount that you paid total and subtract out by how much you actually borrowed, you can see on this loan, you paid $3,624.53 in interest, just interest on this loan, okay? That's not anywhere, that you have the amount of that you paid plus this equals that, okay? So that just kind of shows you. Usually I get gasps out of people in the room, but that's how banks make money, okay? Now, you will notice that there's a scenario 2 here that shows it as 0% APR. I'm going to leave this to you to go ahead and practice on this. The answer to it is found right here in the payment function solution, okay? All of the references, which you'll see in the formula bar, are here. So I encourage you to practice. What you will notice, I'll give you a hint here, is that when you calculate it, the amount to finance and the total you will pay match. And the reason why is because you have 0% interest, okay? This 7% is what drives the difference between the two, okay? So practice on this one and make sure your numbers match up. In fact, I would actually, as you're studying for the exam, I would implore you to clear out all of these cells here, so everything from rows 2 to row 11, and practice these scenarios to make sure it works right. You will notice that the formulas and the way you input things are identical. On the exam, it's possible I may make you calculate a car. I may make you calculate a condo. It doesn't matter, and honestly, it doesn't matter how big the numbers are, because in the case of a condo, it could be $450,000 that you're borrowing, and at a $20,000 down payment. It doesn't matter what I change for you down here in the inputs. The way you do it is exactly the same up here, and you're going to notice that if I give you a condo, it's going to say cost of condo instead, okay? So it's really not going to look different, or I may say monthly mortgage payment, but it's still the same function. You calculate payments the exact same way, okay? Let's move on to the red tab here that says summary. We are going to completely pivot when it comes to our lesson plan here. You'll notice we'll be a little all over the place today. We are going to spend some significant time here looking at charts, okay? And I'm going to show you all the various types of charts available to you. You will notice under the Insert tab, which is where you probably should be looking right now, you'll see all of the charts are here. And the little screen tips will start to pop up as well too as we start to look at these. There's a whole bunch of different things that are in here, okay? Everything from histograms to column and bar charts. It's all over the place, okay? And it's all there. So let's look at the data here for our very first set of couple charts here. You're going to notice that we are looking at the resident students at the main and Priory campus here for Dominican. And then you'll notice in row 3, we have the class rank of those students. And then in column A, you have the buildings that they could live in. And then we have in row 9 and then also column F, the totals, okay? So you can sort of slice and dice this information either way, but you'll sort of see the very basic setup. We're looking at the class of a student versus the building that they live in, okay? So let's go to the bar chart, which is yellow, okay? We're going to start with bar charts. As you can see in the rectangle, and this is probably the only one I'm going to draw your attention to because you'll be able to read, it says bar charts are useful for comparing series or categories of data. Each bar represents one series or category. What does that mean? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take some of this data here and we're going to show how it looks as a bar chart, okay? Bar charts go basically sort of horizontal across the screen, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start by selecting the range A3 over to E8. Let's start with A3 to E8. With that selected, we'll come under the Insert tab, and we're going to come right here, and you'll see it says column or bar chart. I'm going to pull down on the arrow, and I'm going to start with a bar chart, which is right here. I'm going to do the clustered bar 2-dimensional. 3-dimensional, you can see, sort of pops it out a little bit. This one right here is a stacked, and you'll notice the colors look different. It's showing you the key at the bottom, like blue equals freshman, red equals sophomore. It just displays it in a little bit of a different way, okay? It's totally, and this one's by percentage, so each one of these shows the data in certain ways, okay? But let's just stick with this plain old 2D clustered bar chart. When I click with my left mouse button, you'll notice contextual tabs and ribbons appear because we're working on a chart, okay? And then these little circles at the perimeter of this rectangle are what are called handles, okay? And when you hover over one of them and then hold down with your left mouse button and drag, you can make it bigger, okay? So in looking at this, I'm just going to sort of futz around with this a little bit. You will notice that this chart plot area is in really approximately about H2 to down here at about R26. So that's about where it's at. There's the x-axis and the y-axis, which you're familiar with. There's a chart title, which is right here. And then there's this sort of plot area in the middle. And this thing right here is called the legend, okay? Now, in our design tab for the chart, there's a couple other things that are available. We have chart styles. When we pull down on the gallery for chart styles, each one of these looks just a little bit different. Some folks prefer to use these styles because what they do is they force down a really like a compact set of fonts and colors, and it just looks clean, okay? Some would say this is the lazy way out of doing it, but for me, if you want to have a quick, easy way of getting these plotted, choose one of these. However, if you don't want to do that, you can sort of do them a la carte, like at a restaurant, okay? So under the Design tab, all the way over here, we can add a chart element. And when you pull down, you have all sorts of different things. Now, you have your axes titles. So let's go ahead and play with our axes titles. I want to look at the primary horizontal. And you'll notice as soon as I did, because this is horizontal, axis title appears. And you always need to label your data. And this is simply a text box. So all I'm going to do is highlight this, and I'm going to say number of students. So I just put on a horizontal title right there. Back to our chart elements, I'm going to now add a vertical one, which would come as no surprise that it's right here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select that. And also the verticals are a little bit harder because you're sort of operating on the side, but I'm going to say residence hall. So now our data, when it comes to the axes, is labeled. Okay, that's very important so people know what's going on. In my chart title, we'll get there in a second. Well, we'll come right here. In the chart title, you can either turn it off, you can have it above the chart, or you can do what's called a centered overlay where it sort of sits in the data. I like the above chart because it's cleaner and it sort of sits off to the side. So the chart title, I'm going to say this is number of students on campus at Dominican. Okay, so it tells you what the data is. Nothing really big here. Back to the chart elements, we're going to go to data labels. And you have really 5 options that are sort of out of the box here that show you. I like outside end because if you pick like inside end, if you have bad printers, it can sort of muddle up. And I really hate data call out because you can't read that very well. So I would always recommend using an outside end. But again, do what you think you need to do. Other chart elements include data tables, which can pop in there, and I don't know, this gets really crowded and really small, so I don't always use them. And error bars, you don't really use these unless you start to get into statistical things. We'll look at them in a minute. Grid lines, meaning you can turn on the grid lines if you really sort of need to guide how this looks. The legend at the bottom can either be on or it can be on the different sides. And trend line, you could put in a trend line, but these really, again, are more towards statistical things, okay? So the very basics are over here in the add chart elements, okay? Quick layouts, again, are kind of quick and easy way to be able to extend some of your styles. You can change your colors to have different palettes. I would recommend using the rainbow because as you start to look at this monochromatic, sometimes it's hard to see which one's which. You can come over here to switch row column data if you want to rotate them around a little bit. It just flip-flops what's on the x-axis versus the y-axis. And then beyond that, if you want to throw everything out, you can go to change chart type. In doing so, you can decide, hey, this doesn't look good as a bar chart. I want to try it as a stock chart. I want to try it as a tree map, okay? So there's all sorts of different things available to you, all right? Under format allows you to sort of get in here and really do some funky things, okay? So let's say, for example, that you want to, I don't know, add a shape, and you want to point out that, wow, we have 141 freshmen in Coghlan Hall. So what you can do is you can grab the arrow right here, click it with your left mouse button, and then draw out with your left mouse button, you know, perhaps an arrow showing that that is the most amount that's there, okay? And you can change the outline of that to maybe be like red, and maybe you want it to be a weight of like 6. I don't know, you have lots of options. That formatting tab allows you to do so many different things. You can put in maybe like a text, or well, that changed that style on the whole thing, which I didn't really like, but you can do that. You could pop in a text box right here, maybe, and in there say, you know, wow. Your opportunities are endless, okay? You will notice that, you know, by clicking around, you can rotate things, move things around. There's lots of options, okay? Column chart, if we click on column chart, same option, you know, same set of data here. If I choose A3 over to E8, and then go back under my Insert tab, column charts are located right here. So like a two-dimensional column looks that way. Instead of it being horizontal across the screen, now it's vertical up and down. That's a column chart. Line charts, you know, are a little bit different here. We're going to switch up the data set here. Let's say you're a nurse, okay? And I'm going to click back to my Insert tab since everything's here. Let's say I want to plot out a patient's blood pressure, the top and the bottom numbers, by the date. If I select this data and then come right here to my line charts, pull down, I can select like a two-dimensional or maybe a two-dimensional with markers. And then you can see it plots it out as a line. And then, you know, you have two different data series here, one from column B and one for column C. But that's an option for you, okay? And you see their legends are here. This is a very easy interpretive graph. Areas, if we use the same set of data here, if I select it, an area chart is within the lines as well too. The only difference with an area chart here that you'll notice, you know, let's select that one there. You'll notice that the area under the line is filled in, okay? I'm not a big fan of area charts simply because, you know, if the colors are off, it just doesn't look right, okay? So it's a little bit wonky when it comes to that, but, you know, area charts are available. Pie charts, which is the next one here. This one shows portions to the whole, okay? So we're doing proportions here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select A3 over to E4, okay? So we're going to focus in on Aquinas Hall now. Under Insert, in my pies, I'm going to do a two-dimensional pie. And you can see, again, this shows pieces to the whole. So the whole 90 is split into different areas. That's a pie chart, okay? A donut chart, for example, they show multiple series, okay? So if Aquinas is just one series, I can select Aquinas and Murray, two series. Now, come back here to my donut chart, and there you go. You have it in concentric circles, okay? All right, which is kind of interesting. Shows you how that works. A scatter, you know, it's helpful for you to try to get some statistics down here. So when I select my data, I'll come back under Insert, and I'm going to come right here to my scatter. And when I pull down, maybe I'm going to use that, the first one, okay? And you can see a trend line is kind of sort of building here, okay? You may use this in statistics and research, which brings us back to the chart element, that you may want to put in a trend line, like a linear trend line or an exponential trend line, okay? This here helps you start to make some sense of what you're looking at, okay? I will tell you, the higher you go in your education, the closer you'll probably get to using some of these. Furthermore, there are so many other ones in here now. There's a waterfall, there's stock charts, there's, you know, combo charts, which are really interesting to look at. You know, I gave you the very basics available to you in charts, but I would encourage you to play around with these a little bit more and see if there are other ones that may be applicable to your line of work. We're now going to look at Sparklines really quick. We're going to make a completely different change here, but it's still like a chart. A sparkline is a chart within a cell, okay? Under the Insert tab, you'll notice that Sparkline has its own group, which is right there, okay? And there are three Sparklines, the line, the column, and then the win-loss, which is really sort of dealing more with multi-series data. But let's do this. Let's select B4 all the way over to H4. So the overall enrollment for all the different falls going back to 2008, okay? What I want you to do then is we are going to click Line Sparkline. And you will notice that the data range B4 to H4 has been selected. And now it wants to know where is the sparkline going to go. And I want the sparkline in I4. When I click OK, look, there's a little chart within there. And then you get a whole contextual tab and ribbon set here. So what you could do is you can say we're going to turn on the high point and the low point, and I'm going to make the sparkline color instead to be purple. And then, you can turn on markers to show sort of all the different trends in there. It's a chart within a cell. That's probably the easiest way I can show it. And you could change it to a column one if you want to. Look, it looks very different there. And then in your styles, you have all sorts of different galleries in the way you can do this, okay? So that's a sparkline. Let's look at grouping real quick, okay? Let's say that you want to consolidate down this chart to where only, or this worksheet, excuse me, to where only the totals show, okay? You don't want to get rid of the data, but you just want this totals to show in blue. What I'd like you to do is to go to the Data tab. Then I would like you to highlight rows 5 all the way down to 16. So don't include the total, just 5 through 16. And then under the Data tab, come over here to Group, pull down on the arrow, and choose Group. In doing so, it's almost like you get an extra 2 sets of columns here, but I want you to focus on this little square with the minus. If you select that, it rolls up everything, so now it goes from 4 to 17, and when you click it, the data comes back. So it's a way of being able to expand and sort of contract your data on a whim, okay? So we do the same thing here, but that's how you set up a grouping. 2 more to go, pivot tables. Pivot tables are really neat because they sort of allow you to slice and dice your data, okay? Let's take a look at this here. We have it to where we have a bunch of sales data, okay? By salesperson, order date. We're looking at lots of factors. We're looking at who sold it, when they sold it, what the order number was, and how much they sold it for. Maybe you want to look at this really quick and say, I need to know by salespeople how much money they sold in different countries total for the month, okay? In order to do that, you'd have to sort of pivot your data around a little bit to make that work, and for some people, that gets really complicated. But pivot tables allow you to do that sort of multi-level analysis of data that's laid out here, okay? So here's how we're going to do it. We're going to highlight A1 all the way down to E16. Then we're going to come under the Insert tab to Pivot Table. By clicking Pivot Table, a dialog box shows up and says, what data do you want to use? We have it selected. And then where do you want to put it? Do you want to put it in a new worksheet or the current worksheet? I'm going to put the pivot table in an existing worksheet, so the one right here, and I want to put it starting in G2. Then I'm going to click OK. And you're going to notice this little box shows up here, and then pivot table fields are going to be available to us, okay? So maybe I want to say we're going to go with amount, and we're going to drop that in our, let's move amount to values. I'm going to put my salesperson in my rows, and then I'm going to put my order date up here. Look at what happened. In this pivot table, you'll notice that there's one and only one instance of the actual salesperson, and then by the date, it shows here what they sold and how much they sold. So that allows you to sort of pivot that around. And by moving these literally into each other's columns, maybe we want to filter by the country, okay? And then this shows us all, but we could select it and say, show me only the USA. Boom, it repositions it for you. Pivot tables are not going to be on the exam. However, I do want to show you these are very, very useful in Microsoft Excel. And frankly, you're going to see them a lot in your line of work, okay? So that's available for you now. Let's scroll over a little bit, and the final one we're going to do is data validation. In data validation, maybe what you need to do is you need to put here for your patient ID, your last name, your first name, maybe you want to say, what doctor does this person have? And you only want to give them 3 doctor names to choose from. You want to restrict down what somebody could enter into cell D2. This is what is called a data validation. And it's, no surprise, under the data tab. So let's go cell D2 as our active cell. We'll come to the data tab. We'll come right here to where it says data validation. I'm going to pull down and I'm going to select data validation. In doing so, it says right now any value is allowed. But if I want to change it to a list, for example, I can type in Dr. Kleine, Dr. Yang, and Dr. Smith. Those are the 3 options that are going to appear when I click OK in a little drop down. There they are. So this restricts what you can select. And then you can use your fill handle, and now they're in all of them. Kind of cool, isn't it? Now, let's say your blood pressure has to be higher than 0 or the person is considered dead, which we all know, okay? Now, you can also restrict it to where it has to be greater than 0 or greater than a certain number. Under the Data tab, Data Validation, we'll go back to Data Validation. And now we need to basically at this point say it has to be a whole number greater than, and you'll see there's so many options, whole number greater than 0. If that doesn't happen, we're going to have an error alert right here that says stop. And you're going to say, whoa, person is dead. Go with me on this. You go back to your input message. This is what is going to pop up when someone clicks in that cell. You're going to say, value, please enter the patient's systolic BP. Okay, so we set up the rule. We set up what's going to happen when you click in this cell. And then we're going to set up an error that shows if the person, if you do not meet the criteria over here. So let's click OK. You'll notice that that pops up. And now see what happens when I try to enter -2. The person's dead. Okay, so it'll only accept it if I enter like 80. Now it'll let it happen. Okay, so that's what is called data validation. This concludes the demonstration video for Microsoft Excel 2016 Module 5. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I am glad to help. Talk to you soon.